So the Silence and the Fury DLC is on the way, along with an update to the game that will bring some changes. We're going to have a look at a bunch of these changes and see what new stuff be a-coming. Onwards. Change number 1. Timers. This is actually going to cover 2 changes that work with spells and abilities. So when I cast Plague of Rust on this poor little prince here, we can now see how long buffs and debuffs will last. At the bottom of the unit card here, if we mouse over the spell icon, Plague of Rust 35, 34, 33 seconds remaining. We'll see a countdown so we know exactly how long these things will last. You can see the buffs on the prince have a countdown as well, so we can see how long buffs and debuffs have left. So this is just a nice handy change to give us a bit more information that we can use to make decisions on the battlefield. This is also super handy for those units like the Black Coach that have abilities that recharge if in melee. You couldn't before really tell when those were recharging or how long you had left, but now we have an exact timer. So you can see how much longer you need to be in melee to get that effect to pop. So just useful information that can help us know when and where we should be doing what with our units. So that's the first way that timers have changed. The second kind of timer is on the spells and cooldowns themselves. So now when you cast a spell, you'll see the white ring first of all, this is your cast time, and then you have a green ring to show that the spell is active. And it's always green, whether it's a buff or debuff, it'll be a green ring to show it's happening. And then when it's on a cooldown, it'll show a red ring to show that it's recharging and that it can't be used right now. It's still cooling down. And this is different from the current system where a debuff, a hex, would show a red circle while it's active, and a buff would show a green circle while it's active, and both would just show a grey circle filling up while they were recharging. So this just makes things a little bit more uniform and easy to see. All buffs and debuffs now will be green circles while they're active, red circle while they're recharging. So you can easily tell which spells are recharging, which ones are available, which ones are still going on. It's just a slight clearing up of information, so it's a bit easier to see what's going on at a glance. A nice UI change. Change number 2 is quite literally a biggie if you didn't hear already. Ogre Mercenaries. While the Ogre Kingdoms themselves as a faction have not made it into the game yet, Ogre Mercenaries have, and they are recruitable by every single faction in campaign. Every so often you'll get a message about an Ogre Mercenary camp that looks like this, and if you waddle your army over there into the circle, you will be greeted with options on which Ogre Mercenaries you'd like to recruit. You can get some of the melee infantry ones, some of the cavalry, some of the pistol ones. You've got some options. There's 5 units altogether, so these can add a bit of spice and variety to different factions, especially for someone like the Dwarfs who don't have cavalry. Well, now they could have cavalry. The Norskans could have some proper shock cavalry. The Vampire Council Chaos could have some missile infantry. So the world is changing. There's going to be ogres all over the place potentially. They are recruitable by the AI as well, although don't panic, from my experience anyway, there aren't too many ogres running around. You don't see them in every army that you face or anything, so it's not too much to worry about, but it is nice to see them from time to time and get a little bit of Ogre Kingdoms action for all you Ogre Kingdom fanboys, who I'm sure will be very pleased to see the ogres in some fashion. On to change number 3. This might be the biggest one of them all, auto-resolve outcome. Now when you go to fight a battle, you no longer have a balance of power telling you what might happen in the battle. You now have a guaranteed result of, in this case, a Pyrrhic victory, and you'll be told roughly how many casualties you'll take. In this case, it's high, so I'm going to lose a lot. And if you mouse over the auto-resolve button, you'll see flashing red units to indicate the units that you will 100% definitely guaranteed lose if you do decide to hit that auto-resolve button. So now you'll be able to make more informed choices. Do I want to auto-resolve and lose these units? Maybe it's one of my starting units that's really powerful that I can't actually get yet, and I won't want to do that. I'll fight it instead, or retreat. So this is a really nice system that takes away the gamble of auto-resolve. No longer do you have that frustration of losing your important units or losing battles that you really needed to win. You can now be sure before you commit to it. So it's great that this system has made it into Warhammer 2. This is something that was in 3 Kingdoms and I think Troy as well, so it's more of a modern system that worked pretty damn well, and we probably expected to see it in Warhammer 3, but to see it in Warhammer 2 is a really nice surprise and definitely will help the quality of life of the game. So I'm pretty sure a lot of you campaign-only players are going to be pretty stoked on this change. And now to a more minor but still good to know change. Chariot Mass is being somewhat addressed. Now, if you don't know, in the last big patch for the game with the last DLC, they made some pretty big changes to mass and collisions so that individual characters wouldn't get knocked over so often, units were harder to pull through for single large monsters that could sometimes be a bit of a problem, especially in multiplayer, so infantry was kind of given more mass and was harder to knock over and pull through. This though had a massive effect on chariots whose whole thing is charging through infantry and coming out the other side of a unit. They don't want to get stuck in melee, chariots want to keep moving all the time, but they couldn't do that anymore. So while that big change did bring some big positives, it also brought some fair old negatives, one of them being that chariots were now kinda useless. However, there have been some changes again, but only to the Beastmen chariots and the Greenskins Boar Boy chariot, so basically any kind of piggy chariot. There's been some changes which they're trying out. They seem to be working okay, chariots seem to work well for the Beastmen, they do their job of going through things rather than getting stuck all the time, but it's only for the Beastmen chariots mainly. I think they plan to roll it out for all the chariots if it works, but I don't have the finer details of it. I don't know exactly what they changed or how it's different or why specifically it's only for those bory piggy chariots, but from what I've been told, they're working on it, they know it's an issue, they're going to try and solve it for all chariots, so that is good. And the last one is another pretty substantial one, but only for the Dwarfs. Change number 5, runes. The Dwarfs now have an entirely new rune system, which has essentially turned it into a magic lorebook, and feels like it's going to be pretty essential to have in every single Dwarf army, whether campaign or multiplayer. This comes with new legendary lord, Thorek Ironbrow, as you can see, and the way it works is that instead of having winds of magic that you have to wait for to charge up, you have a global cooldown. So once you've used an ability like I just did, you can now see this number in the middle, this 56, 55, 54 down here. I have to now wait for that to go away before I can use any other rune. So every time you use a rune, you have to wait for the global cooldown. So you can't just be spamming off runes all over the place. You do have to use them wisely like any other magic lore. In the background here, I'll go through the spell browser and you can see what all the different runes do. I do have another video on the Dwarf update which I'll link at the end where I go into this a little bit more if you want to see things in more detail, maybe learn more about Thorek, but overall this is a huge change for the Dwarfs and one that I think is going to make taking runes essential for the Dwarfs. Much like any other faction needs to have magic in their army, well now the Dwarfs have to have runes to be really effective, I think, because some of these are pretty damn powerful. But there have been some pretty significant changes, like Rune of Wrath and Ruin, which was one of the most popular runes from before, has now been completely changed and is an explosion. There's now a speed spell, so you can give Dwarfs like 50 speed. Dwarf Rush Army, anyone? Feels like it's going to be a bit of a game changer for the Dwarfs. But there we go. The new rune system for the Dwarfs, part of their update, a few other bits and bobs that they've had to make them a little bit better, which I'm sure all of you Dwarf boys will be very happy with. So there you go. 5 changes coming with the new patch in the Silence and the Fury update. So what do you reckon? Look good? Look bad? What do you reckon? Let me know. Thanks for watching. Hope you've enjoyed this. See you in the future.